know you believe in the holistic approach to beauty.
If I can spend some time on my health and wellness every day as a priority, then I can be a better version of every role that I'm playing. Every day is not going to be a great day. And you just have to find a way to respond to situations that keep coming up, because there are going to be situations.
So, from Patal Lok, then there's a Family Man season 3 you're featuring in that. And what is, you want to talk about that part of yours?
Both Patal Lok and Family Man have given me so much. My acting journey has given me the opportunity today, so many years later, to still be able to do the kind of things that I do.
You know, I've been a fan of yours since I saw you on screen in 1999 when you were a Miss India. How was that journey?
Around me, especially in the form of my father and my mother and my aunts, who said that, look, this is just 1 year. The bigger agenda is what are you going to do with this platform that you've been given that will see you through the next couple decades.
You were in politics at some point, or were you with AAP or something like that, right? And when I hear you say this, you could be very, you could be a policymaker at some point, no?
I think the reason for me stepping up was because I felt I wanted to be able to contribute to making our world a better place. I'll give you a small example. My district in Punjab, Fatehgarh Sahib, where my village is, it had the lowest sex ratio in the country.
Really? Welcome to the Science of Beauty and Wellness by Dr. Anjali Huda, where real stories meet with real science, and health is not limited to diet charts and creams. Being an internal medicine doctor and then going into functional medicine later, I realized that being holistic and giving a holistic approach to the body and to healing is the most important way to look at health in the future. In this series, we sit down with bold voices, the change makers, from pilots to actors, fitness leaders to wellness pioneers, with their inspiring stories on health and wellness and discipline. This is your space to learn, reflect, and glow from inside out. Hi, today's guest needs no introduction. She has been the national beauty queen. She is an entrepreneur, an actor, certified lawyer, and golfer, pilot. I don't know. I can go on. And she's no other than Gul Panag. Welcome to my show, Gul.
Thank you, Anjali, for having me on it. Thank you so much. Thank you for the kind words.
So I wanted to understand, I want to go back in time since, I've been a fan of yours since I saw you on screen in 1999 when you were a Miss India. How was that journey?
I thought it would be a great opportunity to experience the world in a very quick way. I didn't think I was going to win. Not when I entered the pageant. I just thought that the opportunity to meet like-minded girls would give me the kind of platform that I wanted to pursue maybe modeling for a short while. Because I remember sending out my pictures. I didn't have any pictures to begin with, but some home album pictures to some modeling agencies, and no one replied to me. And then I saw a lot of the girls who were finalists of the pageant from previous years pursuing thriving modeling careers. I said, this is not a bad idea. If I become a finalist, I'll be a little recognized. The Femina magazine will have a picture of all the finalists and I'll be one of them. And then at least I can say I was a Miss India finalist. And I always wanted to pursue modeling as something to do to fund my further education in the US. With that goal, I entered the pageant. And very quickly, it became clear that I had a shot at winning. In the first couple of days of the whole training process, when I met my peers, and I just realized I had to keep it together, and that's what really gets to people in the end. Because by the time you actually end up going for the pageant, you've been in training, and the pageant process has been on for about the process maybe about 2 weeks, and the training itself, where you sensitize to what is expected of you, for a little longer than that. And I figured if I could hold it together and remain consistent with whatever it is I was doing, I probably had a shot at winning it. But the idea was that I would get a great platform to pursue modeling. And if I got really lucky and ended up winning, then pursue literally anything I wanted.
Yeah.
with that in mind, I wanted to enter the pageant.
And then when it obviously it probably changed the course of your life when you won.
Absolutely. I was in third year of college, and suddenly from being this person who was in college somewhere in Punjabi University, Patiala, I was suddenly Miss India on the front page of the newspapers of the day. And I realized there was a massive opportunity at hand here. That the platform that I thought was just something I could do to pursue modeling with, I could literally pursue anything in this world, because that kind of access and the calling card that being a pageant winner back in that time gave you was phenomenal. And I had the right kind of guidance to around me, especially in the form of my father and my mother and my aunts, who said that, look, this is just 1 year. The bigger agenda is what are you going to do with this platform that you've been given that will see you through the next couple decades. And I always had my eye on that other horizon apart from just this Miss India pageant.
Wow. And then you at some point started pursuing law.
Well, law was a more recent
I mean, from
interest.
From the pageant, of course, you landed in acting and you did some
Low-hanging fruit. I mean,
Yeah.
it's low-hanging fruit for a Miss
yeah.
India. You get acting offers. But
Yeah.
I was also cognizant that of the fact that I wanted to do more with my life than the opportunities that were finding their way naturally to me. I wanted to go out there and reach for those things that were accessible
Yeah.
as a result of the platform.
Right.
Leverage my acting platform, leverage my public persona platform to pursue multiple goals. The law thing, well, actually, I'll go back to winning Miss India. I was in third year of college, and I was my subjects were mathematics and economics, and I thought I want to finish my graduation. It coincided with me representing India at the Miss Universe pageant, and thinking I'll come back and give exams in September when the compartment exams happen. But for whatever reason, my university disallowed that. And then I said, then I had to drop. I didn't drop a year, but I probably sort of just give the next year. I wouldn't call it dropping a year.
Yeah,
it's a great drop.
Yeah, it's a great
Drop.
Everybody should
So,
get that drop.
I came back and I finished my graduation, and then I thought I must continue pursuing education, because my father would always say to me that this all is very transient. You must build a solid foundation of intellect and knowledge. So I pursued my master's, which unfortunately I stopped in the middle because people said kya zarurat hai karne ki. And then couple years later the penny dropped. I know at 22, what do you know, right? I was 20 when I won, 21 when I became a graduate, and 22 when I pursued my master's, and 23 when I gave them up. Then 7, 8, 9 years later, I wrote to the university, Punjab University, Chandigarh, and said I want to resume my master's. And they said time bar ho gaya. And I was like, what is time bar? How do you have a time bar for knowledge? So many women get married and pursue, raising children, and they may want to come back to their education. You can't disallow them and make them go back to the starting. So I at least Punjab University, Chandigarh had this criteria. So I petitioned the Senate, the University Senate, and they deliberated on it, and they allowed me to pursue my master's, and that thereafter it became a precedent for the university that if you'd stopped your graduation halfway or your master's halfway, you could pursue from the place you stopped. You could pursue from the place you stopped, provided you wrote additional exams that may come up on account of new syllabus and on account of migrating to the semester system. So I did have to write some more exams to bridge the change of the 8-9 year gap. So that's how I did that. And then after the master's, I wanted to study some more. I wanted to write a PhD. I wrote the entrance exam because PhD is now under UGC. You have to write an entrance exam. The slot was narrow. I couldn't do it because there were only 2 vacancies for international relations, like a very lofty plan. And then a lull happened again in my academic journey. I mean, if you count the piloting one, that's a bit technical. I mean, it is academic because you have to clear exams and pass mark is 70%.
But what made you get into?
So when I was in college in Patiala, I used to pass the Patiala Flying Club every day, and I'd be like, I want to learn how to fly. But I was very clear I didn't want to pursue it as a career. And for the amount it was going to cost, because I knew how much it was going to cost. A cousin of mine had just done his flying from there a couple of years prior. So I was aware of the flying landscape. I couldn't bring myself to bring this up to my parents and say, I want to learn how to fly, but not as a profession. It's very expensive. So I kept it in my heart and I said, okay, one day I'll pursue it. And I ended up with a person who's also a pilot, Rishi. And I used to keep talking about it to him. He said, why do you keep talking about it? Do something about it.
Yeah.
So I did something about it. I did the paperwork, did the initial exams, went back to Patiala Flying Club to start flying there. I flew a little bit there. Then I went and finished at another flying academy in Madhya Pradesh called Chimes. And then I wrote my exams, did my check and got my license. So a lot of studying involved.
Yeah.
And then the law thing happened because my son was born and I felt like I needed an additional purpose.
Yes.
So again, wrote the common entrance exam, got allocated a very good college and was able to find time to make it to classes and do my law degree.
You did eventually go into a lot of studying. I mean, despite being an actor also.
I spent about 10 years after coming into the industry studying. I love studying.
Yeah, it is great. I've been studying for so long.
I mean, you had to study. You're an academician, apart from being a...
Yeah, I don't know. No, but you've done so many things. I can't even maybe you inspired me today to do a lot of things in my mind, which I had as a child or a young adult. But, I've seen Patal Lok. And right now you're not Patal Lok. You look so authentic and you played a Haryanvi wife.
You used to tell me how you think that went.
It was good. It was very
had the
good.
right kind of Jat vibes.
Yes, you did actually. I mean, your features are also like that. So yeah, I mean, of course you're a Jat, and there's Jat is an emotion. As I say, it's not even like a state thing. So from Patal Lok, then there's a Family Man season 3. You're featuring in that. And what is you want to talk about that part of yours?
I think it's great to have the privilege to be part of such great shows, frankly. I mean, I am so grateful.
Patal Lok is amazing. I love it.
It's to be part of, probably some of the biggest shows that have come out of India in the last couple of years is truly something I'm very grateful for. Both Patal Lok and Family Man have given me so much. And I'm just grateful that my acting journey has given me the opportunity today, so many years later, to still be able to do the kind of things that I do.
Yeah. No, I loved your part and I'm waiting for the Family Man season 3.
It's going to be very different from Patal Lok, and which is what's really interesting. That I believe it's supposed to be out sometime this year, Family Man. And I'm going to be quite not like Renu from Patal Lok. Yeah. Which is again, I think, a privilege to be able to play to such diverse and diametrically opposite characters.
Yeah, so that shows how, your talent is variable. Like you can do from being a pilot, lawyer, beauty pageant, actor, entrepreneur, like so many things. I can't even, it's not even sitting inside me.
All of us are like that. See, I mean, my fundamental belief is that human beings are by definition multi-dimensional. Because when we were hunter-gatherers, it's not like you could say, I'll only make clothes from the skins of the animal that somebody has killed. Or I'll only go out hunting but not gathering, or that I'll do this and I'll not do that. We all had to do everything to survive.
Right.
You didn't know when you could be the only one left in your tribe. It's once we became settlers that the idea of patriarchy came about, where ownership and property and the idea that we could just do one thing and hyper specialize in that thing. And maybe do lesser things, whether it was division of labor or, there are multiple theories. But from the time we began to be settlers and agriculturalists is when I think the paradigm shift happened in the way the human being sees the universe. I still fundamentally eat like a hunter-gatherer. I don't hunt.
Yeah, I want to go into your wellness part, but before that, I want to touch on other things.
But genetically, we are still hunter-gatherers. Our DNA is still that of hunter-gatherers, which is why when we eat highly processed food, we consume this kind of social media content. It is doing things to our brain that's permanently rewiring it. We're not meant to be in freeze, flight, fright all the time. It's a very heightened response to everything. And that's the kind of environment that we're being triggered in, the kind of consumption patterns that we have, not just about food, but consuming conversation, consuming content. I mean, consuming content is a big part of what we're consuming today. You're consuming more content than food.
It is true.
So how we consume, the books we read, all of that is something that we have to put through a very fine filter. And the filter that I like to put it through is the hunter-gatherer filter, because genetically we're still in the jungle.
Yeah. From that, one thing that stands out about you is like you gave up gluten. You told me.
Yes, recent.
That is really mind blowing, and that many people don't understand. And people come to me say, "हम तो यही खा रहे थे इतने सालों से, तो क्या हो गया?" So, I want you to give like maybe a few seconds on this gluten-free life.
I think it may take a bit more than a few seconds, since we come from a wheat-growing background, both of us, right? I don't think the wheat, and I'm saying I don't think because I wasn't actually growing the pre-Green Revolution wheat myself, right? I don't think it's the same wheat that we were growing, that we're growing today.
Correct.
Firstly. And secondly, I think it's also important to understand that that was the need of the country at the time. We were hugely short of grain. And that higher yielding wheat variety that yields up to close to 50 quintals per acre, from something like 27, 28 quintals per acre, that jump in the output of produce was something the country needed. And once we were grain sufficient, perhaps there should have been a switch in the agrarian policy. But there wasn't, and because of the whole procurement ecosystem, it just continued. And we should have pivoted to something else. Once we were grain surplus, then the agri policy should have, back then by the 80s and early 90s, changed. Attempts have been made to change it, but it's a long process, because even to adopt the Green Revolution strain of that wheat was a 15-year process. They didn't overnight say, "Aaj hum ye wala wheat ugayenge." So there was a process, and that same amount of process will need to go into refining and refixing our the kind of food we're growing. For me, it was a switch when I found out that I was tested on a bunch of parameters. I do test regularly because of my pilot's license, but I was just not feeling good. I was in the throes of perimenopause as a 45-year-old woman last year. Something was off, and I felt something was off for a year or two. Then I went to renowned and celebrated nutritionist Ishi Khosla. She saw my tests, and she said, "Everything is okay, but I feel there's some inflammation in your body, which the IgE, what is it called? IgE. She says, "That's the only thing I can think of. Can you try completely eliminating gluten?" And I didn't even know what gluten was at that point. Yeah. Right? So I said, okay, so wheat. So obviously I understood wheat also means maida. But she also said soy, corn, oats, and so many things that have become part of our processed consumption patterns. I said, fine, I'll eat rice. It just took one day. And that was it. But I think that's where discipline comes in. Right? We were talking about that earlier. What you've been doing earlier, if that's not good for you and if it's not working for you anymore, you've got to change. And change can come at different stages of life, sometimes voluntarily and sometimes involuntarily. I mean, look at what COVID did to us. Overnight, we changed the way we saw the world and the way we operated, the way we communicated. So I think I'm feeling a lot better than I was before I gave up gluten. And I'm quite, what I've also realized, has been a little correction in the last few months, is that a small binge, which may not impact my waistline or the weighing scale, can still mess with my stomach. And the thing with stomach inflammation is that it's not symptomatic. It doesn't show itself in immediate symptom. You could be absolutely fine and yet have absorption issues, as evidenced by the dropping B, D levels in all of us. And then there is the cocktail of the hormones going haywire and the ability to no longer keep our gut health in equilibrium. And then gluten messing with that equilibrium every time you have it. So I think overall consumption in our house of gluten has come down dramatically. And if anybody says we were eating it then and we don't. Why should we
it's,
stop
that's
eating it?
a question that many people ask me all the
It's-
time.
I think it's also the environment as a whole that we now live in.
Yeah.
So much has changed. In our consumption patterns have changed. Everything is out of a packet, and there are microplastics in it. I don't know what cocktail is going on inside, which is moving things around, which is causing the kind of reactions that we're getting to various things. So, in a nutshell, if one can get hold of pre-1960 wheat, I think we should consume it. But if you can't, then you have to find other ways. And the Prime Minister's push for millets is great because we were actually a millet-eating,
We were a millet-eating region, to be honest, yeah.
and now we're growing basmati, which we don't even eat. I mean, I eat because I have no choice of various rice families. But I mean, that's the whole point. I think the recalibration of what we're doing, I don't think Punjab and Haryana have any business growing rice. They don't consume rice as a region. The kind of water it's taking, what it's done to our water tables. But that cycle needs to be broken with aggressive intervention. That's going to take a decade. It's not, unfortunately, a band-aid.
Yeah.
कल से हम नहीं grow करेंगे, फिर क्या grow करेंगे? So, I think that our agri policy is intrinsically linked to our health.
It is food is medicine.
It's, we can't say that, oh, this is what's growing here.
Yeah.
Unless and until I think there is a whole circular pattern in which what kind of incentive needs to be given to grow what. And that's just what we have to work on.
Hearing you say all that, you had, you were in politics at some point, or were you with AAP or something like that, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And when I hear you say this, you could be very, you could be a policymaker at some point, no?
I did. I was a member of the Aam Aadmi Party, and since 2021, I haven't been. I think the reason for me stepping up was because I felt I wanted to be able to contribute to making our world a better place. And two things emerged which made me rethink that. One was somewhat the course the party took, which was a specific issue. But the second thing was a general issue, which was that politics in India is largely patriarchal. And not only is it patriarchal, it's laced with misogyny, where women will be used as tokenism to prove that, we have female participation. Or not even that, if they can get away without it. But are they actual stakeholders? Are we creating an ecosystem where we can build a work-life balance for women to be in politics? When you say things to people, ki bachche to apne aap bade ho jate hain, then how can women choose between politics and their children? They're going to choose their children. If anybody is going to make a choice, or rather, if anybody is going to force a choice on a woman, choose between this and your kids.
It's always the kids.
Always the kids. So any environment that forces you to make that choice, be it a work environment, be it a political environment, is going to lose women leaders. And that's the bigger problem, which cuts across party lines. That we genuinely don't bring in women from the grassroots with the idea that they need to be mothers as well. So you can't expect certain things out of them, given that they have other responsibilities. Which brings me to another place, actually. We also need to bring more people into politics who are doing other things gainfully. Rather, people who are subject matter experts and pursuing professions, because they bring a lot of value to the party.
Absolutely.
Whichever party they chose to be members of. And that system where we must be able to bring into the party individuals who can give X amount of time, 2 hours, 3 hours, 8 hours, until they're elected. Once they're elected, then of course they have to stop doing other things.
Yeah.
But the party also becomes resource rich. The HR pool of the party becomes better. Otherwise, all parties are predisposed towards full-time politicians from morning to evening who are doing politics. When you're elected, you get a salary. That's different. When you're not, how are you funding your existence? And that is why we're unable to clean up politics in India, because we don't create that circumstance for people like doctors, lawyers, camera technicians to support the party by volunteering the kind of time that they can afford.
Very true.
Because only those people gravitate towards full-time politics who either have deep pockets or are looking to make deep pockets.
Yeah, very true. Like if I see the healthcare system, I wish there could be more doctors involved in that healthcare.
Well, why aren't there more doctors involved?
I don't know.
Because you have to also pursue your practice. You have to also pursue the academics that come with pursuing your practice. So then, if you're able to give Saturday to your party, is that not sufficient? Given that you bring so much value from a policy standpoint, that you can do affirmative action from a policy making standpoint.
But लेकिन पता क्या है उसमें what the problem is, like I have tried doing that at my level at one point, but then there is a whole barrier of the actual politicians.
Exactly, because they are full-time politicians. And what is their skill set? What professional, some of them do have it, but what professional, like the Dr. Mahesh Sharma, who's contributed so much to the healthcare sector through his own hospitals, and who's now gone back to being a doctor, apart from being a member of parliament. But my point here is simply, someone like that adds immense value, because otherwise the bureaucrats are going to run everything. And then we have Macaulayan, right?
Yes.
Who is running the show? Macaulay is running the show. It's because we don't have informed people in large numbers in politics. Because we have people who've become full-time politicians. कुर्ता पजामा पहन रहे हैं. और ठीक है, आप वकील हो, आप फिर भी अपना प्रोफेशन परस्यू कर सकते हो. पर अगर आप वकील नहीं हो, तो फिर आपके पास क्या सब्जेक्ट मैटर है as to bring a value?
I think that value add has to be looked at, no?
Yes, I think that's an HR issue. We need to widen the HR pool of our political parties if we are to attract a certain kind of talent. And of course, stop being as patriarchal. It's a long road, but yeah.
Patriarchy is like one of my, what do you say, dukti nerves. It's like, you can't do anything. It's a slow changing world. I mean, like even in Haryana, you see, I don't know, Punjab also, I'm sure, because this northern belt is all patriarchal belt. It's a difficult world for women. They're pushing ahead. Yes.
It's against all odds, and in spite of and despite of everything else that's happening. I'll give you a small example. My district in Punjab, Fatehgarh Sahib, where my village is, it had the lowest sex ratio in the country.
Really?
And that's because they're killing baby girls before they're being born, thanks to neonatal determination of sex. And this was the previous to previous census. Ab to hua hi nahi hai, but I'm talking about the 2001 census.
अच्छा उसका सेंसस ही नहीं है
तो 2011 का हुआ था,
होगा।
उसके बाद शायद कोविड वगैरह
So
हो
is
गया था. And now it's laced with this whole caste controversy. So 11 के बाद शायद नहीं हुआ है. I could be mistaken. But I remember it was the 2001 census that placed Fatehgarh Sahib as the lowest sex ratio in the country. That title unfortunately has gone to another city or district now. But imagine the irony of to me when I find this out. I'm pursuing every dream of mine. In fact, I was just getting into my pilot training at the time. And I was like, here I am pursuing literally every dream I've had. And if I was not born in this household, maybe I would not have been allowed to be born. Because we are where we are as women because of accident of birth. Because our families allowed us to flourish to our full potential.
That's true.
किसी और घर में पैदा हुए होते तो पता नहीं कहाँ होते.
पढ़ने भी नहीं दिया जाता शायद जल्दी.
You know, I mean, different home in Rohtak, at your place, and me in a different home in
my
my
cousin, she got married when she was 16. She finished her 10th grade and married off. And my father let me do whatever I did for so long, So, yeah, it's really a matter of where you're born, no? Yeah, accident of birth. But talking about birth, you have wonderful genetics. I know you believe in the holistic approach to beauty. I mean, you have not a dot of Botox or filler on your face and hardly any makeup.
Lots of grey though,
Yeah,
which I've leaving.
they are not even visible, to be honest. Not from I have a 20/20 Durga vision, so I can't see. But tell me your secret.
I just think messing with nature is avoidable. I mean, that's my belief. I mean, as a doctor, I'm sure you'll have a more qualified take on it. I'm giving a very layperson's take. And if I can spend some time on my health and wellness every day as a priority, then I can be a better version of every role that I'm playing, starting with a mother, a wife, a sister, a friend, a daughter, whatever role I may choose to pursue. I can do a better job of it if I first take care of myself. It's almost survival, right? Survival. You have to first survive to be able to take care of
Other people around you, yeah?
other people around you, right? I read something very interesting when I was working on a documentary for National Geographic, when I was voicing the story of Queen of Taru, about this tigress called Maya, who was called the Queen of Tadoba. She produced the maximum litter, but she lost her first 3 litters of tigers because did not know how to raise them. So it was either her or the cubs, and then she would go out to hunt, and she came back, and the cubs were dead. Or another time she came, another tiger came from somewhere else, and so she had to learn the art of survival and then taking care of her offspring. She was a very young mother, herself orphaned as a I think a 1-year-old cub or something. So as women, we first must take care of ourselves, and we can't say mere paas time nahi hai. So how do I take care of myself? I have 2 parts. One is my physical self and my mental self, and I've been actively working for close to 6 years on my mental wellness. The which I think is really what's very, very critical and important, because that gets ignored. My physical wellness, I've actually been working on since I was 15. Since I'm 46, that makes it about 31 years. 31 years. I've been following a fitness regimen. From the age of 15, my father said, let's go running. And I was like, why? He said, for fitness. I said, but I'm slim. Not the same thing, he said. And I figured that out many years later. And initially I resisted. But then, like good kids in homes where there is no option but to listen to your parents, unlike my son who has the option of not listening to me, new age kids, I didn't have the option. So he used to go running with me. That was the other thing. So he didn't tell me, go run. He ran with me. He wasn't one unfit dad sitting, on a sofa and saying, "Jao daud ke aao." He, for 2-3 years, he ran every day with me. We would go running in the evening and do basics like push-ups and some stretches every day and squats. And slowly, steadily, I realized it made me feel better. I didn't understand the looking better part at that stage. And then once I felt better, I realized I was more productive. And now whenever I'm faced with a problem, given the vast experience of having pursued physical fitness for so many years, I go back to first principles and say, okay, you recalibrate. Something's not working, you check what went wrong. So I log what I eat sometimes to see what is wrong, why am I feeling so tired. When I log my food, I even write how I'm feeling snappy, feeling tired, feeling energetic. I just log how I'm feeling. So I'm able to go back and reflect on what led. Was it a very tiring day? Did I not eat right that day? Did I not fuel myself adequately? So I think that's what allows me to reflect, and taking the reflection to the mental zone, it's important to take that time out and work at it. Every day is not going to be a great day. And you just have to find a way to respond to situations that keep coming up, because there are going to be situations. You can't control the world. You can only control the way you respond. Self-awareness and reflection. You've got to just constantly look inward. Anytime I find myself aggravated, I take a pause and I immediately firstly list down in my head what are the 5 things I'm grateful for in this moment. In this moment. Not in life, but in this. I mean, if something has triggered me and I'm upset, or rather, let me put it this way, I've been triggered by something, right? Not something has triggered me that puts the onus on someone else. I just take an immediate pause and I say, okay, what are the 5 things I'm grateful for? It could be something like this really nice cotton kurta. I mean, anything. It just rewires your brain in that moment.
And it's scientifically true.
It is, because you've chosen to walk down a different path from being why, angry, upset. So SOS, right? Immediately 5 things I'm grateful for. And then I reflect and think, okay, why am I behaving like this? Sometimes it could be something like decision fatigue. I mean, too many decisions. So I try and remain ahead of the curve by anticipating. If I have to wear something tomorrow, I'll take it out today. Because when I'm leaving the house, getting ready, figuring out what to wear is just stressful. It's just adding stress. And I try and remove things like decision fatigue from my day-to-day life.
I never heard this term actually, which is very, very
So a lot of
relevant.
it's an American term actually. A lot of big CEOs, presidents have used it. And wardrobe choices add to decision fatigue. First thing in the day. So rather than you being all pumped up to be the president of the country, you're worrying about, is that a gray suit or a blue tie? So Obama had someone pick out his clothes for him. I mean, there was a whole, obviously, fancy suits and ties and shirts, but somebody, it was always picked up by his assistant because he didn't want to make that decision. Irrelevant and small decisions, but they exhaust you. So I try and reflect about, just like I reflect on what I've eaten and why I've woken up with that Bagad Billa face that we were talking about.
Bagad Billa. I love
It's
that
a-
term, Bagad Billa.
Billik, I mean, the
My
Billa's
mom will hear
face.
this and then go laugh.
But she'll understand immediately.
Bagad
There's a
Billa.
Billy, and then there is a Billa, and then there's a Bagad Billa with like a big
Big
face.
face.
It's just like how I reflect on what led me to feel physically a particular way. I know I'm going to pay the price of these 2 cups of coffee at some point during the day, but at least I'm aware of it. Similarly, how I am mentally is something I reflect on a lot. And I think my journey of mental wellness
That's
has
what
been
I
on
want to know.
reflection.
What do you do for, like, what is the
I think-
regimen that you follow?
There are 3 or 4 things I do. There are SOS things and then there are practice-based things. So practice-based things is I take out 10 minutes morning and evening to just not do anything. Put my phone away and just deep breathe. Watch my thoughts. There are multiple ways of meditation. As long as you're able to switch off and deep breathe. My son has something which he was taught in school called smell a rose and blow a candle.
Oh, that's such a wonderful
Look
thing.
at how they're teaching kids these days. It's so amazing.
It's so amazing.
So
It is so amazing.
smell a rose and then blow a candle. So just take out those 10 minutes first to just breathe for 2-3 minutes, then understand and just watch my thoughts. And this is age-old meditation practice. Watch what's happening. Okay. Like I try and sit by a roadside and see, like I try and there's something I got from Headspace meditation on Netflix. I keep tweaking it. I'm always looking to make positive changes. So sit and watch thoughts like they are cars on a highway. Not chase one particular thought. Or if I'm getting bothered by somebody, don't go after that particular rabbit hole and start having imaginary conversations with that person about what you'd say to that person. We do a lot of that, right? So okay, this person is bothering me, and then quickly move to in that, just again more concentrated deep breathing. So the first deep breathing is like, you just get your breath under control. Then start thinking about, observe all the current thoughts that are moving around in your head. Then once you observe them, in some way you've addressed them. And the third step then is just deep breathe. And then if something is really bothering, I do noting. Okay, I'm really getting bothered by this thing that's not happening. I'm getting bothered by this. I list it out. And then close by just, again, being grateful for the things I have around me. This is the practice piece. Sometimes I'll write all this
So
down.
this is very important because this is a daily thing.
It's a daily thing like exercise. So I often say that wellness is harder than physical wellness, mental wellness. Because in physical fitness and physical wellness, there are only 2 variables. What is your physical output and what is your input? They're only 2 variables. You go to a doctor, they won't talk to you about exercise. They'll say, input, output ko manage karo. That's what my mama says. My mother's brother, he's retired now, but as a GP in the UK, he's now sort of segued towards academia. So I was chatting with him. He said, "Beta ji, just eat less.
Just eat less. I love saying that.
If you want to lose weight." I'm like, "But Mama ji, how?" I'm eating protein. He said, "Just eat less." When somebody comes to us who's is diabetic and you need for them to lose weight, just reduce the calorific intake. So there are only 2 inputs. How much you're expanding. Beyond a point, you can't expand. I mean, how much can you run? A 1-hour run at a conservative pace is about 500 calories, which you can put back in 2 beers or 2 samosas, right? So you can't outperform a bad diet. So that's one piece. Now the mental variables are infinite. You just have to keep addressing them step by step. So one is the practice. I try and do the practice right after my exercise in the morning because I'm already clear-headed.
That's true.
That window of just after I'm done, hopefully if I have time for it, is sort of, I just deep breathe and think things through. And once again at night before I sleep, preferably before I get into bed. Otherwise I do it in bed when I'm lying down. It's easier because then you're anyway waiting to fall asleep. And then the SOS practice, when you're at some point something is really upsetting you, you're angry or despondent or just sad or irritable, just pause and say, okay, this what are the 5 things that I'm really grateful for in my life.
I love this 5 things which
In that moment.
because in that moment, if you can think like that, I mean, any anger can ward off. हाँ, training है.
Gluten कैसे हम क्या खाएंगे?
हाँ, लोग कहते हैं हम क्या खाएंगे? There's so much to eat.
It's also discipline.
Yeah, discipline.
Which is I think the at the heart of it all, it's discipline, because you're not going to have motivation every day. One day you'll be motivated by something you saw, but every day you're not going to be motivated. Which is when you just have to do it knowing that the process works, and belief in the process, both in the work you're putting in mentally and physically. You're not going to get better just because you meditated today once. You have to do it every day, and make little baby steps going forward. And then I think there's no real answer. I'm not an expert.
But this is a very good answer.
It's a personal hack.
I love the personal hack of 5 things of gratitude that very moment, and then deep breathing, and then taking 10 minutes out of your daily routine, just doing something
in the morning. And I think I find that if I wake up before everybody else, usually it's my son who wakes up first, because 5:40 starts stirring and then just gets up. But if I'm able to wake up, his body clock is set because we put him to bed at 7:30.
Okay.
It's the one thing that
I was a 9 p.m. parent, but yeah.
But those times were different. This is new. This is new. It's worse actually. It's not better.
No,
not for the
listen,
kid.
The 7-year is sleeping at 7:30. But let me tell you,
it's a lot of hard work.
When they become teenagers, then they start getting phones. It becomes
so
hard.
That's
I have been through this.
A bridge, or shall I say, a place I'm quite far from.
You have no idea.
Actually not that far, but it comes quicker than you can think. It comes quicker. It comes quicker than you think.
Yeah.
7 to...
The things will change a lot by then. I think people are moving towards wellness. Like, I know a lot of my friends who've given up alcohol and now become like, the wellness is a new get-together. Like it will become like this.
I think so too. I think the kind of schools that they go to, the kind of stuff that they're teaching them also is
very important.
Like, we do Saturday night is burger night at home. With the homemade patties.
Yeah.
अब वो दूसरा बर्गर नहीं खाता because it's junk food. I'm like, it's not बाहर का burger. ये घर बना है. पर बन तो बाहर से आया है. Now what do I say to that? I'm only eating the patty though. He's saying you're not eating, but
the bun, but you're making me eat.
I think this whole junk food conversation in school is really taking form. But also, I think teaching your children through example is so important. If I'm going to show that I'm sleeping early day after day, my kid's going to imbibe that. Or if I'm going to see, like I imbibe exercise and the love of it from my father, because he was doing it. My kid, I won't be telling my kid ki bhai daud ke aao, because he's seeing his mom and dad working out every morning, going for their run, doing everything. It's part of life. He sees us getting up and doing it every day. So and how we eat. My son hasn't tasted Coke, and now when people offer him Coke, he doesn't want to have it.
Yeah, same here. My kids used to have very tough time at birthday parties. Because there'll be Coke, Sprite.
Phobic to trying those things.
Yeah.
I'm often afraid on his birthday party whether he'll even eat the cake that I have to give him. Because he's like, oh, it's too sweet.
But that's very good, because I didn't know that the learning is starting at that age, because I had to really go through a lot to teach my kids how to say no to this nonsense, My kids are very healthy eaters, very healthy. Touch wood. I think it's because of being role models. I think we didn't want to ever bring in junk and stuff.
There's never anything you're going to be able to teach to your kids that you don't do yourself.
Absolutely.
So if we can live that wellness life where we, in fact, I make it a point to tell my son that I'm so sorry I was triggered. I apologize because so I've learned, because he must normalize that it's okay for this to happen, but it's also okay to course correct. Like yesterday, I was a terrible mother. I was a horrible. I mean, in my quest कि golf भी करनी है, swimming भी करनी है, फिर आना भी है, फिर home assignment भी करना है. I was just being this horrible tarantula person to him. And I realized that I'm really sorry that I just me alone. His Didi was off yesterday because of Easter. And then he also, because I've taught him that and any apology must be unequivocal. It can't be conditional. So I said, so he heard me to the part where I said, I'm sorry. And then I said, because, so I said, no. Either you apologize to me, or then don't give me these reasons as to why you were behaving like this crazy person.
Yeah. So that's a very good thing, because
boys, as we discussed, have a tougher time
processing.
It's important for me to demonstrate it's okay to speak about the fact that I'm stressed, that I'm wired, that I'm highly strung for some reason. And I want to be able to use that to apologize to my child if I've snapped at him. So at least I've put in the seeds of him normalizing talking about how you're feeling and then addressing it.
It's a mental health component and what you're talking about today's children, because this is a challenge area for everybody, all parents.
I think it's a challenge for parents first themselves. You have to first understand yourself, the kind of triggers that you have inherited in your upbringing. Because हमारे यहाँ तो मतलब life was बच्चे बड़े हो रहे हैं मतलब
हाँ, बच्चे तो ऐसे ही बड़े हो रहे हैं.
it was a different process.
Yeah.
And I feel the
Our mothers
path
weren't that hands-on, I think. They were not like really involved too much in our lives. Like,
but here the peer pressure on mothers is so high. My kid is doing 40 classes.
now it's
Can you
Chinese
get-
moms, they
Yeah.
call it. I don't know, is the
They're
right
pushing
term.
kids to do so much.
Yeah.
And
Tiger moms.
tiger helicopter, I don't know,
Uh-huh.
whatever the term is.
Uh-huh.
And I think also somewhere, I feel that the kids of today have a lot more pressure to do more. In our time, the pressure was less.
Oh yeah, it was less. Yeah, definitely. There were just few careers to choose from.
I think that also and lesser distractions. There wasn't all this social media stuff to consume. The pressure of how you have to look at such an early age.
I know the makeup. There was no makeup. I don't remember ever having put on
I mean,
makeup
there's
as a
the H&M section of kids has like glitter for little girl section.
That's
so-
terrible, no?
It's what we're
Nail polish. I didn't know what is nail polish up until like really after 12th.
yeah, like 9th, 10th is. I was in a boarding school, so we always get
Yeah, I was
exposed
also,
earlier.
yeah. No, I was in boarding, but we were in such a boarding school, sports school only, and nail polish.
But I used to see people have it. We couldn't put it. But I knew about it. Yeah, I mean,
I didn't know about nail polish up until very late in my life. Nail polish, makeup क्या होता है, waxing क्या होती है, मतलब tweezing क्या होती है,
Yeah.
threading क्या होती है, कुछ नहीं. Like we were such natural kids, and thank God those pictures are not available much anywhere.
Thank God for social media. Even
Social media. So I'm gonna take you through the rapid fire round. I don't know why we put this, but just to make it interesting. Mountain run or a city gym?
Mountain run.
I knew. Dream location to fly a plane.
Okay, it's a tough one. But I'm a patriot, so I'll say beaches of India.
Oh, nice. Wellness app or journal? I know that.
Journal.
I already knew your answer. Now that I've talked to you so
Yeah.
much, I already know, but it's cool. One thing that never leaves your travel bag.
Sunscreen.
Very nice. Good one.
Purse में भी है.
पर्स में भी है. Very good. कितनी बार लगाते हो?
हर 2 घंटे. So I start the day with a normal one.
हाँ.
Then for touch up, I have a spray,
हाँ.
which is for
Which spray do you have?
52 Sundays.
52.
I came across it through somebody.
हाँ.
And then sometimes, like today, when I'll go out after this, I'll put powder. It's a powder-based,
A sunscreen.
small one, easy for the bag.
Nice. Good for
I've begun to get fairly pigmented.
हाँ.
And then
Sunscreen is
sunscreen.
because you would play golf.
I would
also.
put it once in the morning and then I wouldn't put it on again.
हाँ.
And then I realized that I should put it on every 2 hours.
Yeah, that's actually the rule. Yeah. Green juice or strong chai?
Strong chai, but now without make.
Right. What makes you feel most powerful?
Accomplishment. It's a great high to know
I
that
think you are the most powerful woman I have met so far because you know so much accomplishment.
I think accomplishment on everyday basis, Anjali. I didn't mean it like in life. I meant ki today I feel accomplished because I had set a target for myself for the day that I'm going to exercise, be reasonably well turned out, and show up here on time. Small targets. So accomplishments don't have to be big accomplishments. Every day you must feel accomplished with what you've set for yourself. So it's every day is an accomplishment because there are big goals and small goals. I'm very conscious of trying to fix the not being on time part. I'm not very late, but I'm 5-7 minutes late.
No, I think you're very punctual.
नहीं आपने आज देखा
नहीं
है
आप
इसमें.
हो punctual
So,
वैसे.
I mean, 5-7 minutes आगे पीछे. So for me, the fact that I was able to juggle, wash my hair, get ready, and drive an hour, and also finish, not compromise on this morning's exercise. That's an accomplishment. Yeah, I did my since I'm getting back, my grassroots thing is 3 kilometers run, 3 sets of squats, lunges, push-ups, and 30 Surya Namaskars.
Yeah. I love that regimen.
3. उसके बाद then I began building up. I'll do longer run some days, but I didn't came today. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I keep seeing your Instagram. I keep seeing you, posting in your workout outfit and everything. But what I was surprised to know was how much you focus on mental well-being.
Mental to me today is far more important. And earlier, I used to consider that the high I get post workout is sufficient as a mental high because you get an endorphin rush and you feel really great for a couple hours. But the work that we have to put in mentally can't just be the byproduct of what's happened as a result of a physical workout. That's a positive bonus, right? But it doesn't mean I don't put in the work of reflecting, of correction, of watching myself, watching my behavior. Why am I reacting a particular way? Why am I not doing this?
I think this is what I have learned from your talk, like from our chat today, that mental well-being, even I propagate a lot of health, but I think myself, I don't work enough on my mental health because I'm always decision exhaustion.
Decision fatigue.
Is what I suffer from a lot. And I think it's given me some, and I hope it'll give every viewer this kind of, an aim to achieve in terms of mental health, because this is very important.
We have to address the things that are causing us fatigue to begin with. And these little decisions, खाने में क्या बनना चाहिए, क्या बनना चाहिए, क्या बनना चाहिए.
कपड़े पहनने वाला सबसे बेकार लगा, because that is the most, that's why I keep wearing scrubs. Yeah, so I wear scrubs. You know what I do? This is get up, just put on scrubs, and
Which is what even Tim Cook and all and Steve Jobs do, that black t-shirt jeans, because to avoid decision fatigue.
Bilkul. A very good, like Peter Diamandis, I don't know if you know him, he's was my sort of a boss, and he used to always wear black shirt and blue jeans, always. I never saw him wearing anything else. So मैंने सोचा इसका प्रोडक्टिविटी कितना होगा ना, कि ये सोचना ये वाला कलर मैच करता है, ये चप्पल मैच करके.
थोड़ा बहुत तो करना पड़ता है एज वुमेन, बट एक दिन पहले अगर कर लो तो फिर उस दिन सुबह नहीं करना पड़ता.
हाँ, वो पहले एक दिन रात वाला वैसे मुझे आइडिया अच्छा लगा कि पहले ही कर लो. I like that. Well, thank you so much for coming.